Kidrick, former naval aviator, president and CEO of the San Diego Air and Space Museum.
Oh, and my name is Ron Carrico, and sorry to say it, but I was an Air Force guy, so anyway.
That's great.
And I'm also operating the camera, so.
You should be proud. We loved our blue suited brothers.
Yeah.
I gotta tell you the truth, people ask me, who are the better pilots, Air Force or Navy? And I say, Navy guys land on carriers at night, not for me, thank you very much.
Well, because you know, in Vietnam, they hooked up a bunch of pilots. They wanted to find out when they were most anxious, most dialed in. And it wasn't being shot at, it was landing on the ship.
Oh, and by the way, one of the last guys I flew with in the F4 was a guy named Ted Treble.
Ah,
Did you know Ted by any chance?
yeah, he was POW.
He was, that's
Yeah.
right, yeah.
Yeah, he was our sister squadron on the Kitty Hawk.
It took him a while to get used to landing on a runway instead of a carrier.
Without getting into the debate of who was best, almost every Navy squadron, including combat, had an Air Force jock flying with us.
Yep.
And they universally, same night carrier landings, there was no latitude given to their uniform color. They were good guys.
Yep.
Robin Olds came and flew with us. Now, not on the aircraft carrier, but when we were forming Top Gun, he kind of heard, you know, who are these guys? What are they doing? And he flew. Mel Holmes was flight lead. They put Robin Olds in the front seat of the wing F4, and they went out and had a fight. And he came back and he was actually impressed by the different way that we flew the F4 than what the Air Force was doing at the time.
He was marvelous. He was probably one of the best friends of all of us. I had known him a long time from the Air Force Academy when son was going to Air Force Academy at the time.
Oh, wow.
And Robin Olds was the commandant of midshipman up there. And been to football games with him, drank a little bit with him. But man, could he fly. And you talk about leadership. There was a leader, you know, just like this guy.
Okay. Anyway, post-World War II, U.S. foreign policy was focused upon nuclear deterrence and the containment of communism, which was spreading through the use of force to establish authoritarian governments in Russia, Eastern Europe, China, Korea, South America, and Southeast Asia. Vietnam had been divided at the 17th parallel via a prior treaty. North Vietnam armed forces and their proxy, Viet Cong, began to invade their brothers to the south. President Kennedy sent military advisors and material support to the South Vietnamese. After his assassination, LBJ, with his advisors, Robert McNamara, which we all remember very well, of course, Henry Kissinger, and General Maxwell Taylor, began to expand our commitment. On August 7, 1964, the U.S. Congress passed the Tonkin Gulf Resolution, and the U.S. would become involved in the conflict until April 29, 1975. At its peak, there were over 500,000 U.S. personnel in Vietnam. The U.S. would lose over 58,000 men and women killed in action. 500 would become POWs. The U.S. should have dominated in the air, but our performance was unacceptable, and we lost 3,322 fixed-wing aircraft and 3,205 UH-1 helicopters with the Army. The conflict was micromanaged by civilian authority, including restricted ROE, which we all remember vividly, and target authorization, and our losses were the result. LBJ declared a halt to the offensive air campaign in late '68 in order to get the North Vietnamese government to the bargaining table in the hopes of ending the conflict peacefully. During this period, the U.S. Navy evaluated the performance of naval aviation, and Captain Frank Ault was tasked to identify the problems and provide solutions. The centerpiece of his 240-page report was to establish a postgraduate level school in air combat tactics. So, for you, Yang, how were you selected to take on this nearly impossible task with those kinds of statistics?
You know, great commentary, Slug. How many guys were repatriated that were POWs out of, I think your number was, how many shot down and, but how
500.
many,
About
how many did
500.
we actually get back?
I'm trying to think of the number, but it wasn't 500.
No.
We know that.
It was 140 something, wasn't it?
I don't know. I mean,
Something like that.
Yeah.
But our book, Top Gun, An American Story, which was written for the 50th anniversary, is it lays out those statistics, and they're a good reference, and they're accurate.
Right.
And they were put together by my team of 8 or 9 guys. Now, your question was, how did it start? Why?
Well, and why
Yeah.
why you?
Frank Alt once told me, and I really believe it, he had the wisdom that he wasn't directed to do the analysis he did, the 240-page or document. That was his own, based on his own experience as CO of the carrier Coral Sea. And I think it was good.
you still didn't answer the question. Why
know.
you?
I just happened to be, all my guys of the original 9, 8 of them were flight people, pilots or NFOs, 2 combat experiences in Vietnam and survived. One of them had a couple MiGs. Your great friend Jimmy Lang came home twice after being in North Vietnam. He got shot down. And these guys, all of them, when Frank Alt put out his report, he didn't tell us how to do anything with it. He told us generally what was wrong out there. He didn't tell us how to get well or the details of what this weapons school that he mandated should look like. That came from the original 8 guys. I happened to be in 121 teaching basics, tactics, which were much controlled during that time. And fortunately, I had been exposed to a lot of World War II talent, aces, guys like that in my first fighter squadron. The book talks in detail about who they were.
So did you?
Anyhow, and you can tell them what it was like. I think that's part of this program is,
Well, I would probably kick in.
what?
Okay, I would probably kick in that knowing you way back, that a lot of it was also your presence, who you were when you walked into a room. I know that sounds funny, but sometimes, you're looking for the skill sets, but you're also looking for the presence in the room, which both of you have. And I think that added significantly to the choice, okay, of who was going to lead this next step. Because you're kind of saying that, and catch me where I'm wrong, okay, that albeit we were doing fighter tactics, air-to-air, all the things we needed to do that we thought we needed to do before we pushed them to the fleet, but we were kind of depending on the fleet to do that next level,
Yeah.
and it just simply wasn't getting done.
Traditionally, you're exactly right. Traditionally, the Second World War, the victories out there were the innate ability of the pilots in the various squadrons. These guys packed the gear,
Right.
and they weren't afraid of war. And in the first squadron I was in, they passed it down. They didn't want to fly as much as they had in combat.
Right.
They wanted to be home with their families and drink a little scotch and live the American life. So they pushed the flight time. And that goes back to what I advocate very strongly is we should not be putting out American pilots to combat, even today, that have less than 40 hours a month. You know, are we really trying to satisfy industry building complex, big airplanes that are expensive over time? Or if you believe John Boyd's theory, the one thing he lacked was he never identified that pilots are the key to success in combat. A lot of words, I'm sorry.
Right, no, that's okay.
We got to get some airplanes that we can afford to fly, to go with the 12 aircraft carriers we have as a country.
I always used to jokingly say, if you just took the A4 and blew it up, you know, and just made it 2 or 3 times larger, and then said, okay, now we're going to staff it with all the, you know, the tech of today, and let's go fly. You know.
Let me finish because
Yep.
he'll be on me otherwise. Oh yeah.
Well, that's not
No,
very
and I
nice.
like it. He's always right. He's
Yep.
always right. And we couldn't go to the Bureau of Personnel to get the people. The fuse on the success of the graduate school. And I accepted it because one guy turned it down. He didn't want it, maybe for whatever reason. There was some risk involved
Well, and that's
in going in and taking this on.
absolutely, and that's the next question, really. Okay, you got to go pick some people. Okay, and you know, the original members. of
So
which-
can I, circle back and.
Circle
because
back.
I don't think he ever, because of his modesty, answered the question appropriately.
I tried to get him
And I
there.
just, it's in the introduction of the book, but at the time, he was head of the tactics phase. Now, the tactics phase was the most advanced phase of training for the fleet replacement squadron. That squadron had to train people in the F-4 how to fly and fight the Phantom day, night, any weather, anywhere in the world, anytime from the pitching decks of aircraft carriers. And the fight portion was kind of the graduating portion of that whole syllabus. So of the 73 instructors in that squadron, only 17 were determined to be qualified to be tactics instructors. So at the time, Dan was head of that tactics phase. So there was a natural point of selection for him. And what made it even better was that he did have a certain Hollywood fighter pilot commanding presence. He was 6'3", hazel eyes, high level of confidence, good in the air, seldom phrased anything as a question. It was, this is the way it is, and this is the way it's going to be. Which is why we never, on many occasions, didn't tell him actually what we were doing. So, but that's why he was selected, and it was, maybe a God thing, but he was certainly the right person at the right place at the right time to get it done. And it was, the fact that he selected of the 17, the personalities that he did, he selected one for their specific skill sets that were all complementary, and their personalities. There was a lot of acrimony in the group in terms of how we were going to do things. All type A personalities, all highly opinionated, all experienced, and all thought we were the best of the best. But he was able to manage us, and not only that, but it was his vision that gave us direction, and his words that gave us inspiration. Gentlemen, there's an urgency here beyond anything we've ever done.
So why do you think he picked you?
Probably I was an easy target. I was fairly aggressive. I was good at what I did. He got to observe all of us because we were in the tactics phase, and we kind of reported to him. So all the people he picked had certain skill sets that he recognized and wanted in the air, also in the classroom. All of us had a passion for what we were doing, and wanted to transfer that information to the young students. There's a lot of guys who can fly the airplane, let me show you what I can do. No, our job was to train them to try to beat us because they might be our wingman in the next conflict. I want the strongest guy in the world, next to me. So we had to have that attitude. So I think he selected us for attitude, passion for the mission. He told us this is not going to be easy. This is in addition to our regular day job. We're going to be doing this nights, weekends, and whatever else. And we get 90 days to do it, and it's impossible. But you tell a fighter pilot something's impossible, you better put on your helmet and your safety glasses and stand aside because it may get ugly, but it'll get done, period.
Well, even today, 65 years later, Top Gun's still going, stronger than ever. And one of the original criteria that I selected, the 4 pilots and 4 backseaters, was they uniquely had, they all had energy and combat experience, as I said, but they were subject matter, they showed an interest and were subject matter experts in given areas. This one wasn't a bad teacher. And, every one of them, Mel Holmes probably the best aerodynamicist, explaining it theoretically. Remember, we had to take the same airplanes, F-4s, that we were fighting a war for 5 years and not winning. The kill ratio was 2-1 at the time in 1969 when we started Top Gun. And the brotherhood has always existed. I was close to these guys, a little bit senior, and but they were responsive, and they rapidly. What I did is I took, because of some experience I had with the Israelis flying, you take what Frank All wrote and you looked at the war based on all 8 guys' experience out there, and you said, okay, you got this ability. Mel Holmes, you take everything to do with revising the capability. We're going to fly the F-4 different than we ever had. And you can go to John Nash, who had just come off of Air Force Exchange, is a great stick, probably one of the better. And the guys all got together. We each had our own areas of expertise to grow, and ultimately in 90 days, we had to pull it all together and bring in the first class. And you gotta remember this thing. Slug, I know you do. This was graduate school.
Yep.
We had been into that war for 5 years. 2-1. We'd been out, all of us, 8 guys that I chose were uniquely capable, and a lot of open arguments, a lot of development, and ultimately, in time for the first class, we put the book together, and everybody had done a complete job. So I've had people disagree with me, but had I not had, including the intel guy that we had we not had all 8 of us, the way it worked out, Top Gun wouldn't be together then or now.
Well, I think your point, you have to change the world and you don't get to change the airplane.
Dealing in human life.
Yep.
You know that better than anybody.
Yep.
And you go out there, and it's a brotherhood beyond, and it's still a tighter brotherhood, particularly the 6 of us that are still alive from the originals,
Yep.
And I think we had I think God helped us a little bit, particularly time-wise.
Well, there is a God. So, Condor, what were the primary obstacles that you saw?
Well, there were many, but certainly time. We were only given 90 days to do this.
and 90 days to get that first class
Yep.
there with
up
you.
Up and ready.
How many people are in the first class?
8.
8, okay.
Graduate school.
Right.
Not,
Oh, yeah.
But it was,
No undergrads there.
so I would say time, lack of resources, lack of guidance, which is probably a gift, and, ultimately, a lack of acceptance by the fighter community. And I'll kind of elaborate on those. But in terms of the time, 90 days. So we all came together before Thanksgiving in 1968. First class rolled out March 3rd, 1969. So through the holidays and whatever, in addition to our regular daytime job, we put this whole thing together. Now, and that was a monumental effort. There was late night arguments over how to construct the syllabus. We were all very vocal. We were all very opinionated, but it probably helped. And because instead of just one person's vision, it was everything brought together, the sum of all of our experiences in combat. And so that was probably helpful. And we did get it done on time. Lack of resources. We were given nothing. When I say nothing, I mean nothing. We had no facilities, no airplanes, no budget, and no admin support. That's probably why they picked all junior officers, because we had expendable careers. And they didn't put anybody at risk. There was no senior guidance. So it's just go make it happen. Well, I don't think you could, if you tried to start Top Gun today, it couldn't happen. There'd be a civilian study for 3 years and then, budget allocation. It would go on forever. But we just did it. We had to get it done, and we did. But because we had the lack of resources, we had to be a little creative. Steve Smith, Rebel, on the first weekend, he identified an abandoned modular building over the edge of Miramar. Using alcohol, he bartered to have a heavy equipment operator hook that thing up and drag it over next to the hangar. On Monday morning, we painted it with red trim and hand-painted signs that United States Navy Fighter Weapons School. We still have photos of that trailer. I wish we had the trailer. It was 12 feet by 38 feet, and it really looked funky, and it was. But that was our offices and our classroom. That's what we had. That was the facilities. They didn't give us one. We acquired it by other means.
So when you brought in those 8 students into that class, when they got done, what was your intent? Would they go each to an individual squadron, or 2 to a squadron, or because now you need to disperse this into the fleet? So, okay, the training they received, and they're going to walk in with this training that is at some level still foreign to the CO and XO.
yeah, I think probably you'll want to comment on it, I know, but I think it was driven by the time constraints. You only have so much time to try and satisfy them before they come back and grab you by the neck. And so I think, help me.
Maybe I can go back just again to the lack of resources, because that's interesting. Now you had the trailer,
Right.
Okay? No furniture. There's nothing inside of it. So we had to acquire some folding tables and some folding chairs and chalkboard and whatever, and we did. And the skipper says, well, where'd you get those? And we told him, sir, it's probably better if you don't know. And so that's kind of the way that happened. We needed a safe. We needed a safe to control our confidential materials and things. We acquired a safe. All 3 of us were almost killed trying to get that off the second floor level of one of the hangars. But we got the safe. When we got it to the door of the trailer, going, oh God, I hope this thing fits in there. And by the way, do you think the floor can hold this? Hold this weight? Turned out, God bless us, and and we were able to get it in. The thing that we had forgot was, who has the combination? None of us. So we had to pay a civilian to come in and redo that. So, but it kind of, you did what you had to do to get it done. We went to your old squadron, VF-126,
Yep.
the instrument rank to borrow airplanes to use as adversary aircraft. So everything that we did, we found a way to do it, didn't ask permission, just got it done, and hope for the best, and hope tried to insulate him from the knowledge in case he had to testify.
Dick Schulte, Captain Dick Schulte, CO of VF-121 at the time, and he has had very little visibility. He's passed now, but he deserved to be, a historic name of why Top Gun started. And Hank Haviland, Captain Hank Haviland, I'm not sure that some of our behavior and people that were against us when we started it didn't take the heat out on him. Bush Pringle, Vice Admiral Bush Pringle, who was AirPac at the time, when I accepted the job, informally I'd been told, he's going to make you bulletproof. And I thought, boy, that's a promise I hope works, because you don't know. We had a lot of enemies.
Right.
And small classes, and you got to teach at graduate school level.
Well,
That's what these guys could do. That's
Right.
what was different.
Well, the size of the class was also dictated by the fact that we had 4 folding tables and no space in the little trailer. I mean,
Well, and as you said, Yank, now you're going out to the fleet, okay?
Oh,
and
yeah.
And the fleet says, who the hell are you?
Who in the hell are you?
Exactly, and as you know, and we all know, passing on the, it's kind of like I'm reminded of an old joke, of the 2 stern wheelers passing in the dusk of night, the willow trees, the fog, and one guy yells to the other on the other boat, and he says, hey, brother, have you seen the new Savior? And the guy yells back, he says, hell no, I haven't seen the old one. And you're kind of in that arena where you're going to be not just teaching who you have, okay, but now they become the apostles, as they head out to the
That's
fleet.
exactly the answer you wanted. That's what, it's the, we had a phrase we used, I can't remember what it was. You had time restraints, so you have to proliferate the knowledge as quick as possible. And you're in the middle of a war.
Yes,
And you gotta fly the same airplanes that for 5 years
haven't been doing it.
haven't been doing the job. And by the way, somebody's gonna shoot you if you don't get it done.
Right.
Because every one of us, not myself, the courageous guys were my 8 guys. Because they willingly, every one of them, when I opened the subject with them, I talked to them, I said, this is the most important thing we've ever done. And I said, but it's very high risk. I wouldn't be the only one that would have been wasted, but every one of these guys career-wise would have gone with me.
Right.
As it turned out, it worked.
Well, because you're changing the entire paradigm,
Yeah.
okay, of how we had trained, okay, and then, once again, once they left you, in a weird sort of way, as you know, when they walk into the squadron as an FNG, or not, they were more experienced than that, but, they have to now explain, hey, I'm here to help you.
I think all of us, when we came together, realized we've been trained for a fight we're not in.
Right.
And our conventional training is not doing the job, and we need to change this dynamically. But when you challenge the status quo of a large bureaucracy like the Navy, or the conventional wisdom of senior officers and politicians, there's frequently a price to pay.
Right. Well, you guys paid the price, and it was a good deal for all of us. Okay, so you kind of talked about borrowing airplanes. You talked about Hawkeye. Okay, when you looked at this original 8 that you picked, to join you for as number 9. and you have each one having select talents that are helping you put that puzzle together,
Yes.
okay? Who was your best tactician that you recall? Was there?
I think the 4 pilots were probably as good as, at the time, as we could find anywhere.
You could assemble.
Yeah, and we had a guy named Mike Gunther. We brought Mike in. And Mahler out of your
I remember
squadron.
Gunther.
Yeah, and
He used to come over and fly with his
know
126
that.
all the time.
we borrowed your airplane.
Yes.
Schulte on its airplanes. Shirley went out. Dick Schulte went out later. And how many airplanes did we get from him? He bartered somebody, and he got us 6 or 8 new airplanes, A4s, and it was hook or crook. And the guys, we partied a little bit every night, debrief at the O Club, and that was our debrief. We start every morning at 4 o'clock. The kids know how little they saw their father, and
So there had to be some moments. You just kind of cued me to something, that somebody comes over and flies with and against you, okay? That's in the squadron or in another fleet squadron. I guess I can say this, and gets their asses handed to them with new tactics that you guys had been developing. So there must have been some people, that quickly became advocates to say, this is working.
well, the attribute that every one of our students, and Jerry Bouvier got the first mate out of the first class, I might add, took some time because of the politics of what we were allowed to do in Vietnam, for us to have a recognized success. But the key thing that the school did the first year, 18 months, was it gave the guys confidence. We flew the airplane, which we had to use what we had.
Yep.
We did an adversary program thanks to you and your boys and Ken Wiley. And but every one of them later on said, you gave us a confidence in an airplane. And that tells you a little bit about maybe they weren't so confident until fighter weapons school came around. And we did some things with the airplane, every one of us. We did some things with that beautiful Phantom because of its remarkable engines. It had 2 beautiful, very powerful engines. Thrust away piece of ass, as John Boyd would say. We took the airplane and flew it in the vertical and developed the new tactics, which were wildly acceptable.
Well, that J-79 was a beast.
Oh, yeah.
Both of them.
Yeah, you gotta keep them both running.
Absolutely.
But
Absolutely.
you'd ask a question about the syllabus and who
Yep.
was the best tactician. Well,
Yep.
the syllabus, came together with everybody's experience involved.
Right.
But I would have to say that Mel Holmes took the lead in bringing the tactics portion of the syllabus together in a written form.
Right.
Using all the inputs from everybody. Smash Nash, air to ground. He and J.C. Smith went to the intelligence community and got debriefs of prior engagements, who won, who lost, why, that was never really disseminated out
Right,
to the
right,
fleet,
right.
but we used the lessons learned there from others, paid for in blood sometimes, to incorporate into our thinking for how we fought the airplane. And the thing that hasn't maybe been Rulofson went to industry and learned about how our missiles performed in a dynamic environment, because we had always, fought only against non-maneuvering targets. That had been our training. But now, in a maneuvering environment, the missile envelope warped, because between trigger squeeze and motor ignition, the missile would be ejected off, motor would fire, seeker head would be, begin to look for the target. So you could be there and have a tone, squeeze the trigger, 1.4 seconds later, the missile finally comes alive. Meanwhile, your adversary has drifted out of the field of view of that seeker head, and the poor thing goes down the range with nothing to look at, and this guy flies away. So we learned that, hey, the envelope, just because you have a tone, doesn't mean the envelope's good. And I do what all fighter pilots do. So you learn to move to the outside because this is where the envelope was being warped to. So we had to fly the airplane differently. The other thing was, when it came to maneuvering, we couldn't turn with any of our adversaries in a horizontal turn.
Right.
Within 720 degrees of turn, they would have put bullet holes in our wings. But what they couldn't do, they couldn't use the vertical like we could, and they didn't have a roll rate like we did. So we began to use the vertical, watch them turn, come down, use our roll rate, go to the outside. It completely reformed how we flew the airplane. And then the other key element that gave us street cred, out in a place in the desert that didn't exist, we flew against airplanes we never had, which were the exact airplanes that they'd come from the Middle East, but they were the exact airplanes we were flying against in Vietnam. And we flew against them. He flew the MiGs, Mel Holmes flew the MiGs, and we flew against them, and we learned how to beat them routinely, and the confidence to know we could do it every time. Taking that back and rolling into the syllabus gave us street credibility. It also gave our students the confidence to know, hey, this is the real thing, and if we do this, we'll win. And when he talked about Jerry Boulier, who was a graduate of the first class, on March 28th, 1970, so a year after the first class, they were engaged by MiG-21s. He shot one of them down, and when he came back after the debrief, he said, we did exactly what we learned in Top Gun. So
I thought Rulifson could see my cockpit better than I could at times. When I was a JO and we were out there, it was like, how does he know where I am that well or what I'm seeing?
Situational
That's
awareness.
right. Oh no, it was.
You must be able to think to 3-4 dimension, if you will.
Great.
When you're in the middle of a hassle. And
great learning opportunities. I mean,
another one that really needs more well done, and he's gone now, was Ski.
Jerry Sawatsky.
He worked with your squadron.
Yeah.
He's probably the best in the A4 as well as everybody. And all 8 guys, took their fair share at least twice a day flying. And you're developing something new and you're flying beyond, we coined the term pure vertical. And McDonnell Douglas didn't like that. Ooh, we're flying the airplane 0 airspeed,
right,
full burner, going over the top. But you know what that did for us? That allowed us to keep in this big, powerful airplane that if you fought in the horizontal, you couldn't keep track of the enemy. So you go in the vertical, you end up up high. And I think JC coined the term, we fly in the A, guys. And you get up here, and you can keep track of what's going on down below. And then you go loose deuce. Loose deuce tactics were a derivative of the F4.
Right. Well, because we all remember there was occasionally somebody you'd be fighting and they wouldn't do a loop with you. You know what I mean? Yeah. They go, he's got to be turning back. He's going to turn back. Next thing you know, they're in the vertical and they're in trouble, and you just come around and shoot them. I mean, anyway. Okay, so we've kind of talked about this already, but how was this perceived by the rest of the fleet? You're having to prove yourself. The graduates are going. They're probably looking over at you guys going, who do they think they are? A little bit, okay, because it is proved that this training is the is the direction that's going to make us more successful. 'Cause I think you brought up a wonderful point, both of you, that we changed everything, but we didn't change the airplane. And so now you're going to take this airplane that has been fighting for the last 5 plus years, and we're going to fight it differently. And we've got to work that out. And that had to be monumental to do, to accomplish.
Well, it was, and even the people who had been advocates of what we had been doing for 5 years of the war,
Right.
they got quiet, and nothing felt better or was better than success. And if you really want to know what the real benefit of Top Gun is today or was then, came from the students that we taught that went out, and we took a kill ratio in the beginning from 2 to 1 to totally 24 to 1. We were getting 24 of them for every one of us. And almost all the students come back. Steve Smith was operations and brilliant guy. God, he's so good. But he could tell you who called that day. Some CO would call you quietly. He didn't want his CAG to know, but he said, God, the guys are so damn good that came back to us. He said, thank you. Because we had borrowed, Schulte and it wasn't the only one to loan us airplanes. We actually got the squadrons whose people we were training to send airplanes and mechanics to keep them so we could fly them.
So Condor.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we've had class 1, we've had class 2, we get into class 3. Okay, when was that recognition, that you guys were doing good stuff?
Initially there was reluctance because, who are these guys and what is it they're going to tell us that we don't already know, because, we're the best of the best, and, who do they think they are? So initially there was reluctance to come to this little trailer, and they had to send airplanes, they had to send their best air crew. That was the deal, best air crew, aircraft, maintenance support, and part of your training budget to support this for 4 weeks. There was a reluctance to do that. It was Admiral Bush-Bringle who called a couple of the COs and said, this might be a good idea for you to send, 1 or 2 of your crews over there. Well, when a vice admiral, talks to a commander and says, this might be a good idea. Yes, sir, I was thinking that exact thing myself. I'm glad you brought it up. And so we had, we had the first class show up in March. When they left, we had been all day, every day, 6 days a week, we had been flying with them in classroom and passed on all different information, how your missiles work that you never understood before. New tactics, how to fly the airplane. Okay, sometimes we'd get Dan or Mel flying in the back seat because they were a little bit reluctant in this vertical, running the airplane out of airspeed, and, am I gonna fall out of the sky and die or whatever, but they built the confidence during that duration. When they went back to the squadron, they were going to be the training officer in the squadron. They took the syllabus with them so they could pass on what they learned to their squadron members. And many of the squadrons are now going, I didn't know this about the missile and how the thing works and whatever. And we say, you want to fly the airplane? What? When they went back to the squadrons, they were dominating their squadron mates in simulated aerial combat, and that woke everybody up. So by the third class, word had gotten out into the fleet, and everybody now was going, okay, I want to go to fighter weapons school, and I want to wear the patch, because it made good aviators great aviators, and their experience in combat went on to prove that.
And there were not so many empty chairs in the wardroom at dinner at night. We would actually, one of the things I feel best about is a friendship that has evolved with the original bros. We did it well, but my God, nobody can tell me how many lives that the efforts from these guys and all of us saved in that war. When you look at the Vietnam War in its totality, We're probably the only faction that won. Guys, the great air-to-ground pilots that we had, God, they had taken a beating for 5 years, and they were very good. But there were a lot of political things going on in Washington that hurt them. They didn't, and then of course, then out comes a movie, which, you know, put a little salt in the wound. But we got through that thanks to people like you. We got through, you know. I remember the day you taught me to fly the A-7 for the first time. I love flying alone too. He loved it, and his success, Darrell's success, is in the book. He went from being a backseater, RO,
Yep.
in combat. He was good enough, and I don't think he ever asked me, but you just kind of worked it out. He went back through flight training,
I
got
know.
naval aviator wings,
Yep.
and now I think he has a record of tours at Top Gun. How many times were you there teaching?
Twice. I mean,
Yeah.
The original I went back in 75.
But you were back as a student.
Yeah, I went back as a student in 74 when I was
Yeah.
training officer in VIA 51.
That's kind of funny.
Yeah. And, you know, some of my students were now my instructors.
Right.
And including Randy Cunningham and Bill Driscoll, Navy aces. So that was always fun flying against them. You know, is that all you got, Duke? Is that all you got? You know, so we had some good times, and you know, thanks to that experience, they got to see me in action and invite me to come back and be a staff instructor. You know, a year later in 1975, which was for me good.
It never hurt to be one of the original bros either.
No.
And it doesn't hurt now. We ended up being, all of it's fairly well known because of the school. And when you go now to Fallon, Nevada, which is the home, unfortunately, I hated to see them move. The politics moved Top Gun from the beautiful San Diego with its good homes and children going to great schools. They moved them to the moon, in my book, which was Fallon, Nevada.
Well, you know, as you guys are aware, the biggest challenge became, where does Navy Fighter Weapons School Top Gun fit in the command structure
Yeah.
as we go forward?
Yeah.
You know, because remember, initially, who did you guys really report to? In a weird sort of way, nobody. Okay.
Come fit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I meant just metaphorically, nobody.
Hey, can we take a break when you're
Done.
finished?
We'll pick up.
break.
Up. When we get done with this, then you're gonna ask some questions.
Chris.
Okay,
Chris.
I just wanted to see if we had a syllabus.
Oh,
That's what I was doing. I just wondered if we had.
I need to pitch.
no, take your time.
Hello.
I'm sorry, I had a court thing I had to do.
Was primarily brought upon us by the students that we taught that went back out in the fleet, the great naval aviators,
Yep.
and it came home to roost. And the workload increased on all of us. And it's harder now than ever.
Yep.
But there were paybacks. There were really things that were very gratifying. And Condor, I heard you talk on it. We were asked and invited in for quite some time before the politicians got involved again in the design and the future of what our airplanes ought to have if we're going to go out and fly them in combat. You know, historically in the United States, industry builds the airplanes. What the airplanes are capable of. We finally got the oar in the water, right? And you had some opinions on that.
Well, and this is a significant point, okay, in the future of aviation.
Okay?
Well, we're just leading you in.
Well, the general impact though of Top Gun was, I think, profound because the proof of concept in combat was a great wake-up call for industry, the military, and whatever else. And naval aviation was one of the few success stories to emerge out of the Vietnam conflict. And Top Gun, rightfully changed the trajectory of tactical aviation, changed aircraft design, missile design, and aircrew training forever. And not just in the U.S. Navy, but in the Air Force, with our allies and our adversaries who observed this. So tactical aviation has taken a whole new direction because of that. And technology is changing so rapidly, it's difficult to keep up with. But the things that have never changed and that have kept Top Gun at the top are the foundational principles that were embedded in that school from day one, which has more to do with the character of the people that run it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so post Top Gun, what are your feelings? And you're still involved. You can see and certainly hear that you both still believe, still think the process was correct. The process is something to be used and continued in the future. But where are we going now from what you guys see?
Oh, loaded question. Loaded question.
Well, but but the answer is yes, it's a loaded question.
Well,
But because of your role and its importance at the time, it's an important question to, perhaps there's no black and white answer to it.
yeah.
Okay, but there's an answer out there. Because, we're looking at, we've got Gen 5 airplanes out there, we got the NGAD, the air dominance, Gen 6 coming, we're seeing continued changes, we're seeing tech, we're seeing performance, we're seeing bigger airplanes, they look different. You guys understand, and you've said it so well through the years, Yank, the importance of people.
Let's pick up there.
Okay.
Pilots aren't getting enough flight time.
Okay.
I'm talking about the guys out on the carriers right now on 7th Fleet. They get time when they're deployed, but what really makes the Darrell Garys of the future are 40 to 60 hours a month
Yep.
in something. Secondarily, right now today, industry is back kind of driving. We didn't have a gun in the Phantom back in our time. You had a gun in the Air Force version. We never had a gun. We would have done a whole lot better if we just had a gun on occasion. And we had hell of a lot less fatalities out there. I was involved one night. The guys ended up with the Medal of Honor, and I was in a Phantom over them while they were both on the ground, and the troops were coming in on them, and I was talking to them, and we were trying. And Jolly Green. I take it back. It wasn't Jolly Green. He was a Navy can helo pilot. Came all the way in there, went through all the enemy fire, and pulled those guys out of there. And I sat up there in my beautiful Phantom, watching what was going on the ground. You could see the fire, and I thought, God, if I just had a Gatling gun,
Yep.
I could go down there, and I gave those North Vietnamese some pause for thought of what they were going to do with those two guys, and that happened far too frequently. Today, we are over sophisticated. Simple term, and you know it better than I. Pilot loading.
Yep.
Right now, the airplanes industry builds some wonderful airplanes. And they're pretty good, but they're very sophisticated. And when it's a real live fire war going on, you haven't got time to work all the, there's one of the airplanes that are out now that a guy once told me, oh man, it's the greatest. And I said, what do you really like about it? He said, we can see everything going on around us, and the admiral can see our work in the air. And I went, brrr. I mean, can you imagine that? Huh?
Well, no, I can't, because I'm visualizing, okay, gun high, master arm, bam, I'm shooting, in its simplest form.
Oh, well, there is a truism out of the Second World War. It isn't what you see that kills you. In an airplane, in combat, it's what you don't see that sneaks up on you and gets a shot on you, a lucky shot at that. And so...
It wasn't lucky, it was just skill, and I'm sorry.
Okay.
So I'm going to have Ron ask you some questions here, after I get this done. So, if the two of you, gave two or three or one, kind of final messages, because you were there, you were, the ground floor, okay? They came to you. It's epic what you guys accomplished, and of course it had a bleed over to people like me. It taught us the discipline that we needed to exercise. I'll go back to Rulofson. I will just never forget when he said, oh no, you need to roll in just a little bit sooner, you're just a little bit delayed, okay, and if you do it, and then it worked, okay? And so if you're going to pass on those messages, Dan Pedersen, Yang, Darrell, Condor, and said, hey, where do we need to go? Because it is the message that you two have that is important for the future, because we're not going to go away.
Well, I'll take the first shot. The war ought to be fought. Any war involving naval aviation should be fought by naval aviation senior people instead of Washington. We're lucky. There are a lot of guys gone because of two names that you and I mentioned.
Oh yeah.
That were politicians at the time. And that should never ever happen again.
Yep.
The one thing the Navy's doing well right now is they're taking care of their people. They're enlisted people on the carrier. We build these beautiful, sophisticated airplanes. And guess who? Later in my career, I ended up on Ranger as a commanding officer. I had over 5,000 guys, and they maintained those brand new, very sophisticated airplanes. Thank God we have chiefs, first class, and in the carrier environment, I think we've survived because the young guys know they're going to fight the war, either pilots or mechanics, and they get out there and it's a brotherhood type of thing, and they get smart in a hurry, thanks to the chiefs. Leadership from the top down and keep the politicians out of it.
Young Ensign Kidrick worked for Senior Chief Jim Cabin.
Yeah.
Okay, on my first assignment, I think he occasionally would say, don't you think, Ensign Kidrick, it's about time for you to go get a haircut? And they taught us a lot, because it was like, in a weird sort of way, as went to maintenance control and you're 24, 25, 26 years old, you're checking an airplane out from your dad, weird sort of way. So I think you're dead on with the people.
Well, I'll tell you, anybody who's in a senior officer leadership position who doesn't have the chiefs right around him isn't going to do well.
Yep.
And so,
Okay, so people, Condor.
Probably General Patton said it best back in World War II, that wars are fought with weapons, but they're won by men. Today, that'd be men and women.
Yep.
Young ones.
Young ones, and ultimately, I think that's still true. I mean, one of the interesting observations is that technology continues to progress, but technology always counters technology. And the one simple thing that we've never learned how to beat is a well-flown airplane with a pilot with a gun.
Yep.
We can't beat that. If they can kick your ass and get behind you, you're done. And I don't care, how many missiles or whatever else you have. That's the one simple thing. And you kind of go, that sounds a little bit Stone Age, but there's a certain truth to that we can counter anything but that. And that kind of goes back to his notion that we need to train more. And that if that means that we need to have a simpler aircraft that pilots go out and fly 40 hours a month and that because it's cheaper to fly, but continue to build their skill sets, and they're still fly the F-35 or whatever, maybe that's the answer. I don't know, but we need to keep our air crews sharp and at the tip of the spear.
Yep.
And to me, that's people are still the essence of winning, period.
Well, and I think, whoever came up with the phrase the first time, train as you fight, fight as you train, is, is something we all keep in mind.
And the rules of engagement.
Yep.
You think they're going to be any different if we started out there again, over Taiwan or something? Somebody's going to step in with new rules of engagement. And if I were there in authority, no one would ever write rules of engagement unless he had flown combat and he had the brains as a senior naval officer to write the rules of engagement, because the people above him said, win. Go win. I don't want you to use nuclear weapons. I don't want you to do whatever the restrictions are. Win. You write your own rules of engagement, but win. And that doesn't happen very often. I only saw that once.
We started today talking about the heavy losses that the U.S. experienced. And a lot of that was really due to not only our lack of proper training, but the rules of engagement. And in the early parts of the war, civilian authorities said we don't want to involve third parties. And we think that the surface-to-air missiles that are shooting you down are manned by Russians. So we don't want to involve the Russians, so you can't bomb their radars, and you can't bomb their vans and whatever. And I'm sitting there thinking, well, if Ivan is shooting us down, I think he's already involved. But that's just me. I'm just a junior lieutenant. So what the heck? MiGs. We couldn't take an initiative against the MiGs. They had to show that they were an actual threat. We couldn't attack the MiG bases. So they could sit there on the runway, wait, and they had excellent ground control. They'd listen. Their ground controllers would launch them. Hey, there's an A4 over here that is having control problems and he's lagging. Go get him, or whatever. They had home court advantage, and they had excellent support. They had a very sophisticated air defense network, which included radar-controlled guns, missiles, MiG aircraft, ground control. We didn't take out any of their air defense system because we didn't want to involve third party. Same thing with the MiGs. Early on, they thought the MiGs were being flown by Chinese and Russians. Well, if they're shooting us, I think they're involved. That's just me. And same thing, you'd see ships coming into Haiphong Harbor, and they would have aircraft in cocoons and missiles on their decks. Couldn't touch them. Had to wait till they were being used against us. So that was a huge handicap, and not only that, but as a deterrent to morale. We're not in it to win it. So why are we here?
Well, and the old VID requirement.
Yeah.
Hey, no visual ID, you can't shoot even though you've got them on radar. You know they're a bad guy. They just shot at you. Anyway.
Well, that was our advantage. They didn't have head-on capability.
Right.
In the Phantom, we could kill them 12 miles head-on before they could even see us and not have an engagement. No. So why even carry it? Because we were required now to make a VID, and by the time
Yep.
you closed on something as small as a MiG-17, you were within 2 miles from that aircraft.
Yep.
So you're 6 seconds away from him and close your speeds. He's already seen the big smoky trail of your Phantom is beginning to maneuver against you. If you can enter the fight in a neutral position, that's good. Generally, maybe you're starting to dig yourself out of a hole already. So the whole VID was, terrible, because right now, then, okay, it's fights on. And only one of you is going home.
Yep. By the way, Condor said one of the funniest things I've ever heard anybody say. How many watches have you killed?
Several thousand, I'm
Okay,
sure.
good.
Depends on how many girls were in the room, probably.
Okay, Ron.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, I've eliminated a lot of the questions I had, but first of all, I flew the F-4 too, and when I've learned a lot about the different aircraft of World War II. One of the things about World War II, when the guys actually went in combat, they had 400 and 500 hours. That's why they were so much better. They had really trained a lot in Europe and in the South Pacific. And to me, when I look at what's going on now with the airplanes that we have now, the capability of an F-4 was probably not a lot greater than a P-47. A big airplane, big gun, big powerful engine. But let's go back to the start. When you were flying, early on you were flying the A4D, the Skyray.
Yeah.
And reading your book, you were flying out of Coronado, and you did a lot of air-to-air, probably not authorized.
Yeah.
Great fun, I'm sure. And I'm sure that was really part of your main interest in aviation, was being air-to-air combat. Mano a mano, as it would. Now, maybe not just mano a mano, but that kept your attention, because then you flew after that, you flew the A3D, which doesn't look like much of an airplane at all, as I recall.
F3D.
F3D,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
And you flew it for 2 years, right? But at this point, you were doing fleet air defense, correct?
Yeah.
And the fleet air defense at that time was more standoff missile sort of thing,
Oh, sure.
and not
They had
dogfight.
taken the guns up.
Right. But no.
Let me bring you up to
Go ahead,
speed on
please.
that. Okay?
Exactly. That's what I want.
I was in the ensign, got ordered to VFAW3 at North Island. Had done well in the training command. The last tactical airplane I flew was the Korean War highly successful Panther, Grumman Panther.
Sure.
And so even in the beginning in training command, they were letting us hassle with that airplane.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, and then I get orders to VFAW3. I don't know what it is. I know I'm going to all-weather night fighters, which is right on. I worked very hard to get the grades to go there. I check in. The first man took me in, other than the duty officer, took me in to meet the XO. You know who the XO was? Gino Valencia, the second living ace, or third living ace of the Vietnam, or Second World War. He had 26 kills. In there having coffee with him was Alex Varashu, probably the finest gunner the Navy ever put in an airplane. I got checked in and did the normal things that junior officer does. And they said, well, it's time to go meet the skipper. Yeah. The captain of that fighter squadron was the man who discovered the Japanese fleet in the Battle of Midway. Highly experienced. Howard P-80. And then we went downhill from there. The famous Tex O'Neill ace. There were 5 aces in there. And Claude Living, who's alive today, and I still correspond with his son and the old man. He's 103 years old.
Wow.
Not bad for a fighter pilot, right? There's hope. And so anyhow, and all those guys I just spent a little time telling you about had done it Second World War. You add up the kills, a lot of them, Campbell. I went to the first ACES convention with Valencia. I carried his briefcase full of scotch. And it was down at, it was down at Rosarita Beach, and a good time. But you know what? They didn't want to fly anymore for health reasons, and they don't need to fly anymore. They've done it. America won Second World War. It was an outstanding naval aviation series of victories of that war. So what they did is we had about 60 airplanes. I got 1,500 hours in 1 year in the Skyray. And man, was it fun to fly. And then Valencia, I used to fly with him he'd go up, we'd fly the old airplanes, the F-3Ds, and he'd talk constantly about what it was like Second World War, what he did, how he was taught, and the places he had been. And you just couldn't, I was a sponge. I loved it. He made me love aviation, but inherently I think I did.
So
it's
then,
like this guy, we loved it.
so in other words,
Go ahead.
you lived and breathed air-to-air combat. I mean, that was
Yeah,
that was,
well,
that was
the
your-
Skyray made you that way.
there you go.
you know.
That's where I was getting at.
The
Okay, now
Skyray was,
I want you to tell another story. I want you to tell the story about what you encounter with the F-86 pilot.
hey, that was a good stage setter for my days at Top Gun. I thought I was pretty good in the Skyray, had a lot of flight time. I flew that airplane 3 times a day sometimes. And I, here I am, ensign, pretty soon I make JG, and I'm getting to fly as much as I can physically handle. So, it grew within me, and I go over to the I-Bar. You ever been to the I-Bar at North Island?
No.
It was owned by and run by the ACES. And no JO like me ever went in there unless we were invited there. And once in a while we get to go over with them and have an interchange with them. And part of the flying I did with the older guys was they talked a lot about tactics and what it was like in real combat. I hadn't been there. And they were inspirational. And they taught me how the fight club that's in the book. Yeah, there was a fight club every day back in that time. Now, the guy that I started on that subject with, I just one day was up about 2 days before Christmas, beautiful California weather, and I was by myself in the Skyray. I went up to around Edwards because I saw some airplanes doing this in the contrails. And I said, hey, that looks like fun, I'm going up there. And I'd been going down to the fight club too, on occasion, on Friday afternoon. But I went up there and I watched an old F-86 beat the crap out of a F-8, brand new Navy F-8 Crusader airplane, the best the Navy had in those days. And he whipped his fanny. And when he was done, the F-8 went back to Miramar, and I pulled up alongside this guy. And here's a hot dog. Here's a hot dog in the Skyray. He thinks he's gonna, get it on. So I gave the guy the signals, and we met to the merge. And hell, I think it only took 2 turns, and that F-86 just ate my lunch. And when I got back to Miramar, after being humiliated, I might add, humiliated, my ego was pretty low. And then the phone rings at Miramar, at North Island. And it's an Air Guard major, an old major, probably gray hair, who had done it all. He had Boku hours in the F-86, and he said, "You're not bad, son, but have you got a lot to learn?" And I was even lower after that comment. But you know what? I went back and talked to Valencia and some of the guys. I said, there are some elements I don't understand. Training command never taught me about know your enemy, know the enemy's airplanes, watch the weather, how to use the atmospherics of the weather to win every time. So anyhow, that's how that got in the book.
I just love that story.
When he had a key element, mentorship. Both he and myself were blessed to have great mentors. Now, sometimes that would happen maybe over beer at the O Club, where the guys who'd been there and done that would convey to us, not only air combat, but stories about, here I had this emergency, behind the boat on a dark night, and here's how I dealt with it, and here's how I survived. And there were definitely occasions where that came back, in my memory bank and was of assistance when I, found myself in a similar situation. And not only mentorship about the air, but mentorship on how to be a compassionate, effective leader, and how many people I had the blessing to have worked for who led by personal example, held themselves to a higher standard, and taught each of us what we should be, as officers and as men, period.
Yeah.
Yep.
And he wrote the foreword to the book, incidentally. He wrote the foreword to the book, and it took us almost to the 50th birthday to finish that foreword. And fighter pilots don't all write well, but this one does. See what's in front of you. And the foreword to that book has 8 or 9 elements, including murder board, that we developed. He and Mel and I, and he and I talked about it. And we put them in the foreword of the book. And they're the standards for how you make it into Top Gun. You must have the human capabilities that are in the front end of that book, or you're probably not going to go there. And if you get there for the wrong reason, you ain't going to stay. Those guys, right now, 56 years later, are better than we were. They work harder, and they're smarter. They're international. Do you know Germany has its own fighter weapons school, which is a mirror image of what we did. And Norway, I've been invited to Denmark to go over lecture. They're doing the same thing. There are some new airplanes out there that your friend John Boyd had a great deal to do with, and that's the F-16. If I had to go to war tomorrow, I'd probably take an F-16.
Well, and you don't want to tell the Air Force, but it's probably one of the best looking airplanes.
Oh, hell yes. And it came out of John Boyd's algorithm plus his friends that we spoke about that were part of that brain trust he put together. But he never had he missed the one element that my guys knew, and that is the young, smart guys the pilot will always be the winning factor. The best airplane can get shot down if it's not driven properly.
Well, and I think your topic of unplanned ACM you know, I don't want to say unbrief, because, you know, typically we'd have, the term we used for years was Indian country, okay? So if you got back a little bit early on the mission, you just entered Indian country, which was basically a box defined by the TACAN or whatever, and it was free-for-all. And you learned more, okay, because your comment a little while ago, it's the guy you don't see, okay, that's trying to saddle up on you, and you go, where did you come from?
Yeah.
So,
You know where that finding came to my mind? From the adversary studies we did. We put the adversary, because we got hold, I went back to CIA headquarters, myself with J.C. Smith, and we got our hands on details, and we knew exactly what their tactics were. And then for graduation, the first class graduation, I don't know whether you were in the back or what you were doing, but Mel Holmes and I led the first class up to Area 51.
Cool.
And I briefed it as we were going out and we were going to fly an adversary or a mission, tactics mission against an enemy. Didn't tell them where we were going, didn't tell them anything. We took off and we went in Area 51, and here come Muggs McEwen, Tudor Teague, and the guys who were up there as Navy test pilots flying the MiGs. And the guys got for graduation, first class, they got to graduate by fighting the real airplane that was going to oppose them in combat. And it worked.
first place I ever saw a MiG-21.
Yeah.
Was right there.
Well, that's better than
Yes.
Then your rearview mirror.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
that's Muggs McEwen.
Okay, if I may,
Sure.
who came with the name Top Gun? Who came up with that? I mean, that wasn't the official name.
I think we'd been on Ranger, the carrier. That was the nickname of the aircraft carrier that I skippered. And I don't think that had anything to do. You know, you can't always, when you're trying to write and type and put together new training, man, you can't always say
Navy.
U.S. Navy Fighter Weapons School. So,
Who came up with the patch?
Mel Holmes and Steve Smith on a cocktail napkin at the O Club on a Friday night.
That's one of the things about the Friday night cocktail hour, if you want to call it that. The Air Force, same way. You learn a lot more sometimes doing that
That's
than
right.
anything else.
Yeah.
So did you actually get to fly the MiGs yourself?
do what?
Did you actually get to fly a MiG?
Yeah, I've got about 8 flights in
17, 21? Which?
17.
17.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, it's funny. I interviewed General Cassidy. You know Cassidy,
You
right?
know Admiral Cassidy?
He sat right there when I interviewed him. Yeah.
Tom Cassidy.
Yeah, and he told me he
Yeah,
flew.
not general.
And then I said, Ed, I'm sorry.
Very powerful personality, totally understated, very humble man,
I thought it was so
and
funny.
demeanor in hell in an airplane.
He said he'd flown like 100 different fighters. I couldn't believe that.
Oh, yeah.
But I
he's
said, how did you ever fly the Harrier? I said, how did you ever fly the Harrier? And he said, well, I read the book. It was a single seater. It's a single seater. And he said, I read the book and I went out and I flew it. And I said, well, how did they ever allow you to do that? He said, well, I always brought them back. So I thought that was a good one.
I flew Tom over in 126. He came because when he was comp fit.
Yeah.
I flew him over to El Centro. He had to go do something, whatever. So he needed somebody qualled in the airplane. You know, so we get over there, and he even took me with him to the meeting and all that stuff. So we get back in the airplane, and I look at it and I say, Admiral, what does your LOX gauge say? He goes, mine says 0. And I said, well, so does mine. So, because, you know, I knew he left it on, okay? So it just bled it. And so he said, what do you think we ought to do? Well, is this a test? I signed for the airplane, okay? I said, Admiral, if it was me, I'd just not attach my mask tightly and I'd fly back to Miramar. My thoughts exactly. Because it's one of those moments in time that you're going, okay, this is the big, technically speaking, we should have gotten out of the airplane, had them fill the LOX tank, right? We've all been there, but it was just a funny Tom Cassidy story that was very personal.
He was a very strong man.
He was. And here I've got, like I said, I've got ComFit, you know? Anyway, so I think we're done.
Wait, not done.
Okay, well, you gotta go quick.
There's some things you gotta talk
We're
about.
gonna have lunch.
Who selected the adversary pilots? Did you do that?
It kind of an outgrowth. You know, we had such a big in volume flight schedule every day, trying to stuff the kind of things that we're flying. You know, Mel would come in and say, God, I need an F4, I want to go out and I want to demo this, I want to fly it once, and I want to take JC with me. Or, you know, we had demands put upon us, time-wise, that drove a lot of things like that.
Well, did the adversary airplanes, the A4, et cetera, T-38, did that start right away with the first class?
No, well, yeah, we didn't have enough Phantoms available to us, so I went to these guys. Ken Wiley was a skipper in the beginning, and then, and you know, it's like when you expose pilots, Navy pilots, to some good flying, they magnetize themselves to you. Mahler, Mike Genther, phenomenal, great airplane driver. This one, all these guys are banging on the door wanting to fly.
Yeah, it's kinda
and
like-
we had big schedules every day.
And it's kind of like,
We didn't have enough
what else do you
airplanes.
need?
Plus
From
the
our
reser-
standpoint.
The reserve squadrons were
Yep.
F8s at the time,
Yep.
and they were always wanting to get in a fight
Yep.
against the Phantoms and whatever.
So he's right, we were knocking on their door saying, hey, we can be there for you.
Oh, hell yeah.
I got two more questions. Well, okay. God, I could ask questions all day long, by the way. The murder board, you've said that several times, but for the film here, what the heck is that?
It's uncompromising peer review. And initially, we knew that we had one chance to get it right. So we all took our subject matter, put it into a lecture form, and we stood up in front of the other 8 and gave our lecture.
Oh, I see, okay.
Well, and tell them that this is an assignment given to you.
Yeah, so, and we all had our own, little, subject that we were
Hookah.
the expert in. But we stand up in front of the others and, it was brutal because egos were left shattered on the floor. It was kind of like, Jesus, did you shine your shoes with a Hershey bar? Can't you get your gig lines straight? I mean, what, and, why do you keep scratching your nuts or whatever, excuse me, but, it was things like that. And then they start judging the content, the flow doesn't go well. I mean, this doesn't flow into that. And, you use this term, but nobody understands what that term is. And not only that, but we had one guy who kept ending all of his thoughts. So he'd go 2 paragraphs of information and then said, on the thing. Kept on the thing. I mean, just that's how he ended, every complete thought was on the thing. On the thing, what's that? So we cured him of that. And but that was, we knew that we were going to stand up in front of people. It had to be, not only did the content have to be perfect and usable by the people we're speaking to, but it had to be delivered in a manner that they'd never seen before.
Because it was a graduate school. It was not what we've been teaching for 5 years of the war. This was new. It had to be acceptable to the fleet people. We had to boom and do it perfect. And they did. Every one of them, the brothers.
That rolls me into a thought that follows right onto that. I have the opportunity to go up to Fallon, Nevada and speak at Top Gun maybe 2 or 3 times a year, either graduating class or the staff. And so I get to see the evolution of what's gone on. So our initial classes were 4 weeks long. It's now 13 weeks. And you talk to the students going through and they said, this is like being fed through a fire hose. And the academics are extremely demanding. The environment that they're in is demanding beyond comprehension and unforgiving of anything. So they're completely focused. In order to get there, just to be a student at Top Gun, the screening process is extreme. And they've been observed by their fleet squadrons, now sent there. It's going to cost money to put them through the course for 13 weeks. So just to be there is extraordinary. They go through this 13 weeks under complete stress. The staff gets to see them as they come through, and they'll tag one or two of them to come back as instructors. So that Top Gun gets to replace itself, which is kind of unique, because most fleet squadrons is you get whatever the Bureau assigns to you. Top Gun says, no, we've seen these are the best in the fleet to get here to be students, and of those students, these are the standouts. So now they come, and you'd think they check in their first day at Top Gun, they're thinking they're pretty shit hot. It takes them 6 months typically to develop their subject matter expertise. So if they're going to be, say it's the AIM-120 missile, they take what their predecessor, who's going to be rotating out of the school after 3 years of instructing there to go to the fleet or wherever he or she is going, they'll take that body of information. They'll now go back to industry, they'll go back to intelligence community, see how they can expand on that and make it more relevant for today's environment, including the technological changes that have occurred. They'll fold that into a PowerPoint lecture. They'll give it to the person that they're now succeeding, make some changes, and then every one of them is going to say their most feared moment is the murder board. They need to stand up in front of the staff and give their lecture. And not only is it extreme, but some of the lectures are 4 hours long. Now, not all at once. I mean, they break it up into pieces, but maybe 4 hours of information. They're allowed one peek at the screen for their bullet points. They have to have their entire, if they have to look a second time and see what happened, it's over. Come back when you're ready.
Wow, that's cool.
So that portion is extreme, and that's just the ground school side. Now on the flight side, they have to go out and, the class is broken up into phases, 1 versus 1 against the instructors, 2 versus 1, 3, and you graduate into mass formation, exercises. But the pilots, who are now the new instructors, they have to fly 35 flights, called IUT, instructor under training, against the other instructors. And they have to brief it, fly it, come back, and reconstruct everything that happened during that engagement. And they're kind of graded on that. And it takes 35 flights before they're now authorized to teach in all phases in the air. So that's how extreme the school is in its relentless pursuit of perfection.
Last question for me, at least. Can you train ACM in a simulator?
There's one very, very, very important factor missing. Simulators generate a lot of money for industry, but it doesn't have the death factor. You can go get procedure switchology that are memory work, but no one's been killed since NASA in a simulator. And there is nothing in the business that we're in like flying in combat. We deal, that was my theme all the time. Guys, it's serious. We deal in each other's human life every day. We not only go out and train in real live airplanes way, way up in the sky. I mean, you can get killed in this business.
Well, but I mean, you're probably never going to get 40 hours a month these days. It's
Yes,
just not
we
gonna-
will.
Well,
Yes, we will. But it's going to be a war. Some real live shooting is going to have to take place before we ever get back to to where the guys get to fly enough. You know, I'm opinionated, I admit it, but justifiably, and over to you in a minute. You know, we were up to a graduation at Top Gun, and I talked to the CEO. Yeah, I said, I always ask the same question: how much flight time you got in the airplane? He said 9.5 hours. I said, this week? No, 9.5 hours this month. I said, why? He said, I have to share it with the boys. The young ones who were going through needed the flight time more than the senior guys. And we all did that for a while. There have been very few times in my career that I got more flight time than I ever wanted.
Yeah, the discussions about simulators, you know, augmenting, you know, flight time in an airplane or replacing it has been a topic that's been discussed forever. Back in the training command, I was in one of the first classes that gave 10 visual simulator FCLPs in the A4. And
FCLP stands for?
field carrier landing practice. And because we've tried to do this, you know, the A7 had the NCLT, the night carrier landing trainer, actually, which was a pretty good trainer because you could accomplish a lot in 45 minutes. Because you just keep putting them, you know, 10 miles after the ship and let's do it again, give you different weather conditions, deck conditions, and it wasn't bad. But that question of replacement, you know, or augment, okay, I think they're far more right than wrong on the topic of we need more flight time, just the way it is. The best training you're going to get is in that airplane.
Absolutely.
So Top Gun is still hampered by resource constraints. The airplanes up there found that now belong to the air wing that oversees everything. So when the class comes through, they have priority. But remember that air wings that are getting ready to deploy will go to Fallon for their workups. And Top Gun prepares the air wings to go deploy to Japan or wherever it is that they're going. So that begins to draw down on the aircraft requirements and the time requirements for the staff as well. So their only job is not just the class now, it's also preparing air wings to go to do their job. Nothing against anything the skipper said, but there are some key niches that the simulators can fill.
Oh, sure.
So a lot of times if one of the students will, you go out and not do well in the air, each one of them is assigned a mentor on the staff. Mentor will take him to the simulator. Let's do a refly. Right. Let's in a sterile environment. Let's see what you did wrong, what you did right, what moves you could have made better. And we'll go back out and we'll refly it and see if we can't correct the mistakes you did.
And that's where it's an augmentation, not
that is. But the other one now is they also have simulators in place now, because while they have the big range out there, we also have adversaries that can watch how we train. So they look at satellite scheduling and other things because we do not want to give away how we train the best of the best. So sometimes they'll actually be in one of the simulators at Fallon fighting some of the guys in simulators at Lemoore or back in Virginia.
Oh, wow.
And that can't be observed because it's a highly secure environment. So again, it is augmentation, but in the world we live in now, it's maybe fills a more important gap.
Well, because the same thing was Area 51. Okay, there are times the airplanes don't fly.
Oh, yeah.
As we all know, because of, you know, awkward satellite positioning. But it's always
they've worked at making it better.
Yes.
But it's still when the sound is up and the wheels are raised, from then on, you better do it right. You better be as good as you think you are.
And that's why the topic of replacement, augmentation, because the very simplistic view by people who don't know, okay, is, oh, you can replace 20 hours of flight time with 20 hours of simulators, and it's just not true. You're not gonna get the
You're
same,
not pulling G's for one thing.
absolutely.
Good
you're
job.
not.
Yep, and you can't
Okay.
simulate the pucker factor.
Well, they've tried to come up with simulators that as you pull G's in the simulator, it inflates next to you and all sorts of weird stuff. And it just doesn't replace, because some of the flight time that they have both mentioned, and I would mention, when you say 9 hours, 5 hours, I mean, some of the Marines out here at Miramar, the paucity of flight time that they're getting is crushingly low. You know, you got people at Lemoore waiting to get into the, you know, the Hornet or the 35, and, you know, it's months because they're just not being able to, they don't get the throughput. And, you know, so.
And the one thing that really has hurt overall Navy and availability is ACM is a time-consuming, flight-hour-consuming business. You gotta get a lot of flight time, and you gotta, for the individual's benefit, and that wears the airplanes out in a little faster time frame.